Right. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Blake Peterson. I will be chairing this November 5th, 2020 regular board business meeting. I'd like to call it to order. For roll call, I have all of our directors in attendance. Communication from the audience. So time has been set aside on the agenda for citizens' requests of the board. Due to the coronavirus COVID-19 statewide restrictions and in keeping with the efforts of social distancing to reduce the spread of the coronavirus, the meeting of the Gresham-Barlow School Board will be conducted online rather than in person. If you are a member of the community and wish to provide public comment, please email your comments to Avery4, that's AVERY 4 at gresham.k12.or.us ahead of the meeting, and your comments will be part of the public record. I will, so that is for anybody who has not already submitted a public comment. Again, the email address is Avery4 at gresham.k12.or.us. With that, we have a meeting agenda. Is there any action?
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Director Howitt, second by Director O'Connell to approve the meeting agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next up is our consent agenda. So all items in the consent agenda are matters considered by the board to be routine. They'll be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the board or persons in the audience request specific items be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. Right now we have 6 items on the consent agenda. These are minutes from the regular work session, October 1st, minutes from the regular business meeting, October 1st, minutes from our work session on October 15th, a financial report, personnel report, and a policy update.
I have a question for the policies for adoption. We spoke about that, Lisa, a bit earlier. Was that updated or should that be taken out?
To answer your question is I did hear back from the legal. I go to OSBA to get our legal advice, and because it was placed in there and the wording that we were looking into finding out about was the false statements. They recommended leaving that because it is in the law, and it is also for both the victim and for the potential investigation. So I did share that with Blake. Sorry that didn't get to all of you, because I did get that back this afternoon right before the presentation.
So if there's interest in separately discussing that, Director Stowers, you're welcome to request pulling it. Otherwise.
I request pulling the sexual harassment policy. I do think that's an important piece because it does play into victim blaming, which I really want to avoid in our policies. And if we could just take that out and look at it at a later date, it doesn't even have to be placed on the agenda today.
So, Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the removal under the policy updates, policy JBA/GBN, remove it from tonight's meeting and put it on a future conversation.
I second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Director Howitt, second by Director Stowers to approve the consent agenda with the removal of policy from consent agenda item B6, policy update, removing policy JBA/GBN, sexual harassment, to consider for a future date. Any discussion?
No discussion on consent agenda.
Okay, then I'm going to ask for a point of clarification. Is that a policy that that is not a policy that requires any doesn't force our timeline due to legal requirements? Is that accurate?
That is not accurate. So we've had the 2 conversations, and and the recommendation from OSBA is that we needed to update the sexual harassment. We've had it in 2 policy work sessions and brought it to the board twice. And so it is a timely policy.
And our standing policy does not cover our legal requirement.
I didn't check with Jordan on this, but my concern is that this is a policy that we look at on a regular basis because there's updates to the law. And I do know that there were changes in the law from the last time that it was approved.
Okay. So we have a motion to restate, motion to approve the consent agenda with the removal of that sexual harassment policy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. I'm going to ask the policy review committee to convene in the next week as best as you can to solve this. And I'd like an invitation to that meeting as well, please. Okay, we move on to recognitions. As my own introduction to this, we do recognitions. We used to do them really well. We do them really poorly in remote environment because we haven't figured out how to do them well. But that said, we do want to continue to recognize excellence within the district. And so I'm going to turn this over to Lisa Riggs for recognition of instructional leadership.
Thank you, Chair Peterson and Board of Directors and Superintendent Pereira. I am just looking at the Sarah Hayden, that's what we're doing, the recognitions. It's so exciting. I wanted to be able to share this opportunity with the board and our public that we would like to celebrate Sarah Hayden as the Elementary Instructional Coach Award that she received, which is an effort to recognize the instructional leaders among district staff who earn the award outside the district. And we had the opportunity to recognize elementary instructional coach Sarah Hayden. Ms. Hayden received the Celebrate Literacy Award from the Portland Reading Council and the International Literacy Association. The award recognizes organizations, institutions, and individuals such as Sarah that have made significant literacy contributions at the local level. Mrs. Hayden was honored with this award and her dedication to promoting literacy, her lifelong love of reading, which is instilled in others, and her significant contributions to literacy at the local level. The award also recognizes her for outstanding work in the literacy education around areas of professional practice, advocacy for literacy education, and the community involvement, leadership, and professional development, and attention to diversity. I know that we have included remarks from the instructional coaches recognizing Sarah Hayden as being a great colleague and a support to all of us. I would like to recognize her for her outstanding professional development that she does to support all of us in Gresham-Barlow School District, and that I know that she plays an intricate role in our regional areas as well with the regional MEST, and is in lots of book clubs and leadership around those book clubs along with her coaching staff here. I have had the pleasure of being in many states and many districts, and I will tell you that our coaching staff and Sarah Hayden is the outstanding leader that she is recognized for, but we have amazing supports, and I really appreciate her leadership that she provides to our teachers, our administrators, and all of us here.
Assistant Superintendent Riggs, I just want to let you know she is in the audience as well.
Oh, good. I'm sorry, I can't see everyone. And so that means everyone needs to give her a round of applause. So let's do that. And I don't know if she has the ability to speak. She probably will be too shy, but I hope that we gave her lots of kudos, and that she needs to know that we really respect her pedagogy and her supports and her amazing talents.
Well, thank you. I am not going to put anybody on the spot to speak, but our students are incredibly blessed to have such tremendous professionals in our district, and to be recognized among greatness is certainly quite a recognition. So congratulations, and thank you, Sarah, for your work in the district. Moving forward, we have the Gresham-Barlow Education Foundation report. We receive updates about every two to 3 months from our association. We're very grateful for their partnership and the way that they serve our students. I see two folks who might be qualified to present. I see Tyson Bell, who's chair of the board, and I also see Vicki Moen. So I'm going to ask one of you to present update us on the foundation.
Tyson Bell, president of the GBF. Not much to report, just a follow up from our golf tournament.
We can't hear Tyson.
AM, PM golf tournament for social distancing purposes. Fortunate we raised $40,000+ for the foundation. And title sponsor was Lee Crutcher Lewis. I want to thank them and our other sponsors as well. And a shout out to Terry Taylor. He's been on our golf committee, helped us out through support and getting sponsors as well. And he was just excited out there on the golf tournament, helping out. So shout out to Terry. We appreciate everything that he does for us. And Vicki, you have anything to add? I think she's done.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for the update. So $40,000 through the. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks to everybody who golfed. Dr. Pereira, did you have a team this time, or do you only go when it's dumping rain?
Well, if you want to call it a team, but yes, we were out there.
Yeah.
I think we left a golf ball effect on the course.
Well, because we have a number of folks in the audience, just Gresham-Barlow Education Foundation has committed millions of dollars to the benefit of our students. They do so through incredibly innovative ways to reach our classrooms. This is a benefit that not every district gets. This is started by volunteers and sustained by volunteers, as well as community contributions. And it, you know, in other circles, you might call them margin of excellence programs, but they give teachers the opportunity to make our schools even more competitive and more beneficial to our students. So we're so grateful for your partnership, and thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you everybody who golfed and raised money so that we can see some benefits in our classrooms. Okay, at this time we have time for an update from the superintendent, Dr. Pereira.
Absolutely, Chair President, thank you, everyone. I just have a very few things, but I want to give some time for my team to update the metrics as well with the audience. And I did want to share, though, this past Monday, hosted my first superintendent student council advisory group, which was really outstanding, I think. If I say so myself, it was really engaging and maybe I was just like a little overexcited to be able to interact with students again. I think we had 33, 34 kids on the list, and I think we had about 27 who were able to participate, and those who were not, we sent information that they couldn't make it, but definitely will be at the next one. But we really just kind of set our norms, identified some topics that we would like to be able to talk about throughout. Got some feedback, solicited some feedback from them regarding distance learning and other things throughout the district. I wanted to be able to offer the board an opportunity as well to interact with this group in the future. And they will also be assisting Karina and Carla with the Equity Committee as well. They're really eagerly excited about being able to participate as well. And I can say it's well-represented group of students from our district, from every secondary school, every middle school and high school, which is kind of two ages to be able to interact with, which is nice. Of course, I love middle schoolers. That's just me. Also had key communicators last week as well, which is pretty exciting as one of our first ones, thought exchange and getting information from parents and community members. And of course, as you are well aware of, Chair Peterson as well, that I've been working with the Governor's Committee on Healthy Schools Reopening Committee, these new metrics that John's going to be presenting in just a moment. It does relax the metrics some, but we still have to meet the metrics throughout in order to bring kids back in any capacity. And John's going to do an overview of that briefly for the community and for the board.
Thank you, Superintendent Pereira and Chair Peterson. Sarah, are you going to be able to present again? While she is bringing it up, I'll give you some highlights of the changes. The standards are relaxed and they do represent they are more like our neighboring states now. We were very, very strict before. We now are looking at a K-5 return instead of a K-3 return, depending on the metrics we meet, and I'll go into that in a bit. They've taken away what used to be a very restrictive one as well, a state positivity rate. We don't have to meet a certain state standard, it's by region now. And those are basic highlights going into this. What you're seeing here, board, is our rapid response team model. We have teams that are meeting every week. There's a reciprocal communication process between the district office level and the buildings to react in real time to changes that are coming our way, as well as institute plans as we design them. Sarah, you can advance on that. These are the old metrics and how we used to look at it. On the left-hand side was the old case rate. So to get K3 back, we used to have to meet a standard of 30 cases per 100,000 in our region, both Clackamas and Multnomah County, because we have students and staff that live in both places. And for the secondary, you had to meet a 10 case per 100,000 rate, and you had to meet those for 3 weeks in a row. In the middle table, you'll see the positivity rate. We also had to meet a 5% or less positivity rate for 3 weeks in a row to be able to begin to bring kids back. Those are the old rates. And as you can see, the data there is reflecting, as of last week, we were trending in the wrong direction. Sarah, you can advance that next slide. This is the new table. What you should focus on as you look at these tables is the first row and the third row, because those apply to the large counties of which we are in, Clackamas and Multnomah. We have to meet, or for us to be able to go to on-site and distance learning, we have to have fewer than 100 cases per 100,000 in our county and a positivity rate below 8% now. That is a substantial change, and I'll go into more about that later. It is a big loosening is what it is. To bring secondary students back, the case count has to be below 50 per 100,000 and a positivity rate below 5%. Metrics cover over a 2-week period now, and and I'll get into how that math happens in just a bit. I do want to say I had this question earlier. When it comes to positivity rate, the county or the state is testing 4,000 to 6,000 people a day, which is much higher than they were in the summer. And that is due to the federal government being able to deliver about 80,000 test kits recently, and they continue to come. So we are increasing our testing capacity and our actual tests that are happening. What was anticipated would happen was the positivity rate would drop. Instead, we're seeing the opposite. It's actually increasing, which is probably contributed to more people gathering together more often and winter and fall. Next slide, please, Sarah. These are the new metrics, and this table will be on our COVID-19, will be on our website. If you go to the COVID-19 button, which is on the right-hand side of our webpage, you'll be able to get to these metrics very easily. It'll be posted tomorrow morning, and it will be updated weekly as the state updates us. As you can see on the left-hand side, that's the case rate. And the red line is Multnomah County, and the blue line is Clackamas County. We are right now at about 167 per 100,000, which is double what the old metrics, but don't let that mislead you. What they're now doing is they're taking 2 weeks, adding them together, and then counting that in 2-week periods, 14 days. The reason that the state is doing that is it eliminates anomalies. They also increase the amount of cases allowable for a return accordingly. On the right-hand side is the positivity rate. Again, we are seeing an increase in both Multnomah and Clackamas County. The same math applies. What they did was they add 1 week's positivity rate, say at 7%, and the next week is 8%. You add those together, you divide them by 2, and you're at about 14.5% positivity rate. Right now, we're at an 8% positivity rate. We anticipate that next week that will increase substantially along with the case rate based on the daily cases that we're experiencing in Oregon, but we'll see when that happens. Go ahead and advance that slide, Sarah. This is just another way to look at that same data, and you can see the trend lines increasing. The 167.2, which is on the far right-hand side, is reflective of last Friday. The new metrics will come out again this Monday, and they do every Monday from the Oregon Health Authority. Go ahead, Sarah. We've also surveyed our staff because we are planning for a return. It will happen at one point or another of who's able to return. These are our initial numbers of how many people can't return due to a medical condition of some kind. So we are starting to see a challenge for staffing our buildings. You can also advance to the next one, Sarah. This is staff who are reporting they cannot return because of childcare issues. We all know that because your parents are experiencing it just like we are. Staying home is absolutely critical because many kids don't have a place to go for school. Advance that slide, please. Now back to that same table I showed you before. The community spread in Multnomah County is keeping us from being eligible to return students no matter what. Even though we are at 167 cases per 100,000, which allows us to be in a transition phase, our trend is more toward the distance learning column, which is currently what we're in anyway. The same is true for the positivity rate. It's 8% and growing, and we're trending toward the distance learning phase. So even if we were physically in school, based on how rapidly the numbers are deteriorating, we would be actively right now planning for sending kids home for a period of time. Recent Oregon case counts at the bottom. This is one of the more concerning aspects of what we're experiencing in Multnomah County. 805 cases in Oregon today. Yesterday, 589, on the third, 482, and on the second, 559. And if you go and get the numbers for the spring, this is substantially higher than the spring. Some other things that are of interest and concern right now are we've had a 67% increase over 14 days in case rates, and it's actually increasing faster. It's not slowing. We've had a 17% increase in fatalities in Oregon, and that's increasing as well. And we've had a 21% increase over those 14 days in hospitalizations. And if I take you back to the spring, one of the reasons they closed the economy down was we didn't want to overwhelm our medical systems because it prevents others from getting care as well. And we are way higher than we were in the spring. So there is concern there for the region. Chair Peterson, is that anything, questions? That's the end of my presentation at this point.
Any questions of Mr. Cook? Dr. Pereira, with your permission, we also, so the community is aware, we've received this update. We actually receive it pretty on a recurring basis, but we received this presentation at the work session just before this, and so I want to make sure that the board has an opportunity possibly to answer or to ask those questions that were asked in the work session. But specifically, Dr. Pereira, Mr. Ely gave an update on the risk side, and I thought that was beneficial, if at all possible, to share.
Absolutely, Chair Peterson. I'm more than happy for Mr. Ely to give that update. I also would like Lisa to kind of give a quick overview of the instructional pieces when we have an opportunity to. But I also want to make it very clear to parents, if and when we start the transition back to hybrid, that parents always have the choice to stay online with their students, have their students remain online. eGPSD will be available throughout the rest of the remainder of the school year, no matter what we're doing at the building level. Mr. Ely?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So in the last meeting, my comments weren't necessarily prepared. I'll do my best to represent them the same way here as I did in the last meeting. What we're looking at as a district is from just the general liability perspective, is that the COVID situation is not improving. And so we do have a relaxing of the metrics. We have seen some of our neighboring states start to open up a little bit. We've even seen counties in Oregon able to open up in a limited capacity at times, and we're learning from all of those things. But the risk that we carry as a school district has not changed. The Oregon tort liability hasn't changed. Our insurance coverage has not changed. We are not covered for communicable diseases. That was not a choice that we made to not purchase that insurance. It's that insurance providers don't offer it anymore, or our insurance provider, when the pandemic started, chose to stop covering communicable diseases as of July 1st. So we still do not have that coverage. The state has not offered a waiver of liability in a legal capacity, meaning the legislature, and we have not received any indication that they are planning to take up that issue. Like I said, we are learning from other districts that have opened, and we see across the United States and really even in other countries that we're getting actual data in about this virus and how it is impacting schools. Whereas at the start of this, we were really relying on models of former viruses that maybe behaved similarly or in ways the public health officials thought behaved similarly. And so what we're seeing is that schools, by and large, mimic the communities that they're in, meaning that schools themselves don't seem to be any greater risk than what's going on in a community, which means that in communities where the virus is subsiding or cases are going down, things like that, there does seem to be some evidence emerging that in those communities you could safely open schools. Unfortunately, as you saw in Mr. Cook's presentation, in our community, we're going in the other direction. And so the overall situation really hasn't improved from a pure liability perspective for the school district. We are cognizant of the fact that there are lots of different risks involved and consequences experienced from this virus by our families and our community. And as a staff, we are trying to balance those things. But I did want the board and the community to understand that just because things are changing, with the governor loosening up metrics, things like that, we as a district, we want kids back. And so I think most of us, if not, I'll speak for myself, not on behalf of the district. I'm happy to see that those are relaxing, but the community needs to be aware that our liability as a district has not changed.
Okay, and then from the instructional side, Dr. Pereira conveyed to Lisa Riggs.
Thank you, Chair Peterson and Superintendent and Board. I'd like just to speak about our intent as well, is that we know that teaching is social. We know that teaching and learning is definitely something that we want to get back to doing. I know that we have Michelle here to speak specifically about special education and English language learners and what we've been doing for specific populations of our students that are most vulnerable at this, but also let's speak about our wishes for our elementary students and middle and high. We face that in a K-12 setting. We know that engagement is a difficult thing. We faced last year addressing the incompletes, and we do have some additional time at the high school level to regain some of that, but that's always on our mind, and it's always on our mind, regardless of being on a comprehensive distance learning. But it's our early warning systems that tell us that that's very much a concern. And we also, from the beginning of the summer, when we had our conversations with families and parents and community, saying that we know that those K1, 2, 3 are also very much needing that close work for math and literacy. And so fortunately, our response teams and all of them think about there's overlapping academics. So even though John and his team in response are really putting together those critical operational practices, it's counting every space and how we would get as many students back in general ed populations, and then most importantly, those vulnerable populations. So that's my take. We're also looking at case plan A, plan B, plan C in our teaching and learning team of what we know will be a very difficult task when you're a teacher, and we're facing such difficult situations right now in just the teaching and learning, that how is it going to be that we add this hybrid approach? And ideally co-teaching would be best, but we're waiting to get those answers back from HR's survey to find out exactly how many of our teachers and then eventually how many of our students are returning to a hybrid model and interested in that versus EGBSD. So there are choices, and then there are also those that we need to make sure that we have the right amount of staff to support our students in that model, and then technology approaches as well. So it's very much a team effort on all of our parts. And again, I just want to compliment the academic team and the operations team and all of us for working on this problem of practice together, and that we will continue with our work sharing and listening to our community. And I think that's something that's really important, is although we didn't really explain how we're doing our meetings, we are getting feedback and listening and making decisions around what the community is offering and what we're hearing from the community. Michelle or John, any other academic folks on the team that want to speak to special ed requirements, the work that we've been doing with those populations, and then Dr. Pereira, anything else that you would like us to speak to?
I could speak to special education, just
Okay.
following up. So I wanted to appreciate the opportunity to share. Our special education teachers and case managers have been working incredibly hard to try to innovate and find getting an echo there, as many ways to support our students as possible. We've shifted a lot of our related services to telepractice. We're finding ways to get materials to homes, working with our busing companies to make sure we're getting those resources home to help provide better services to students this fall. We've also had for those students in specialized programs that need an iPad for learning, we've been able to, those finally arrived off of the ships coming across the ocean. They're here, we're getting those out to students and families to try to do a better job of how can we, since we have to do this distance learning, how can we do it better? So we're really trying to adjust that. We've really continued to focus on partnership with parents. We know that every family's circumstances are different and students' needs are different. So really trying to individualize and meet the needs of students and families. We've seen some successes in places we maybe didn't expect, and we're also seeing challenges that we know that we're still grappling with, and it's hard. And so I want to call that out because it's there, we know that. We've also looked at redesigning how we're doing evaluations so we can make sure we're meeting the letter of the law in terms of we have that responsibility to make sure we're finding our students that have disabilities and getting services to them as quickly as possible. We're also, we've just figured out how to set up a limited in-person assessment center for students where we can't do the evaluation any other way other than to do an individualized assessment. There's very few of those because we've really tried to innovate the assessment pieces, but we're getting ready to make that available. So far, we don't have any that we need to do, but we're ready when we get to that point. The other part that we're really heavily focusing on now is how can we organize services as we move into a hybrid? What can we do? Because we are, kind of chomping at the bit here to be able to do face-to-face instruction with our students. And so really partnering with our ELL program, title program, we're all kind of coming together going, how can we work together to make this work and do more for our kids? That's really where we're coming from. We know students in specialized populations, specialized programs, like our LE program, is we're like, how can we get more to kids, more access? So we're really starting to get to the nitty gritty of that. How would it work with this schedule or that schedule? So I just want to assure the community that it is right here on the forefront. We are knee deep in it, and we're going to provide as much as we can within the parameters of cohorting and safety and all that we can. So that's my update.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. Dr. Pereira, I was just going to have, there was some questions about how we're getting community input, and I wanted to share how we're utilizing new tools in our key communicators, if you wanted to just share about that a little bit.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, through key communicators, some of the things we did with our families and we'll continue to do, we have another session coming up this coming Tuesday, I think. We are posing questions about how feedback from families and having them engage with each other, as well as to about what is needed more for the CDL. So we're just constantly trying to tweak, improve what we're doing. I mean, obviously COVID's here to stay for a little bit anyway. And with our plans, we also have to make sure that those things are blessed, if you will, by our local health department. So it's a somewhat of decision based on our metrics and also our local health department as well to get feedback. And we've shared a lot of this with families. I think one of the concerns Lisa may be alluding to is one of the families, parents, there were lots of questions about why are we transitioning now and in other situations. But as I shared with them, that I was very clear about our presentation last week was not about transition. It was just an overview of what we would do. And that plan's already out there. I mean, it's on our website, the Ready, Learn, Safe School stuff. It's out there along with the metrics on our website. So it wasn't necessarily new information, but we wanted to get feedback from parents as well. I think that's all I have for here. I don't know, operational wise, I know that John has given some of that information. Jordan has as well. I think I would ask questions of the board as to any operational or instructional things you would like to know. And then, we would also like to know, what would you like to see us do next? I mean, we have plans and we've tweaked them all year, trying to adjust to whatever lies before us or what we're projecting to happen. But those things are there.
I posted my question to Lisa, but it was just, I can repeat it, Lisa, about how, if she could go more into detail of how community input is being gathered this summer. The district hosted information sessions and did polls. And so I'm just wondering if those same strategies are being used this time, or is there a different way you're doing it?
Yes, those same strategies are being hosted this year. We have town halls. Of course, key communicators new. There have been several communications that we sent out to families and parents regarding what's going on. And if any families are looking for that communication, we usually post those on our website. We kind of archive them for families to kind of have a look back. Of course, the virtual sessions were not necessarily recorded, if you will, but we have obviously archived all the letters and communication home to families. We usually do that almost on a weekly basis, trying to ensure that families have information at their fingertips, because just as fast as we can get something out, things change. I think my team and I know the board would as well, I would really love to have all of our students back. If we could make that decision based on, metrics that would meet that, definitely. We're all longing to have our students back and where they belong and where we believe that they learn best. This is in our classrooms with our outstanding instructional staff.
Let me just add And that I was sitting here racking my brain. Thank you, John. Thought exchange is something that even the regional MESD has utilized, and it's a great tool. This is what we've used. I don't know if you've heard of it before, but instead of just a key communicator meter, meaning where we're going to get individual requests, it's a great way to sort of survey someone, anyone that participates in a question, and then you can comment, and then you can rank in order what's the most to prioritize, and that really helps our team identify what the common concerns or the highest concerns are from our families. And we're going to also do that with our not only parents and families and our adults in the community, but then also our partners and our teachers and our classified staff as well. I think it's a great tool because it really does then rank what's on people's minds, and we get to see it. And then it means that it's not a representative of maybe the person that is able to ask the question, but others can jump on that same question. And we really have learned a lot.
And Chair Peterson, I think I have on my my own agenda is to ensure that we prepare and summarize some of the things that we're gathering through these with the board at the December meeting.
We have some questions from the audience. I'm not sure if we have the capability of opening it up or if I should just read what's in the chat.
Well, I'd like to preface that, Director Stowers, with a brief. So we're going to get to public comments, and there's a plus and a minus. The plus is how active and engaged the community is, particularly on this subject, in effectively 3 buckets. One is how do we get our exceptional learners back into school? The second is how do we get our K-5 students back into school? And our third is how do we open up activities and athletics for our secondary students? Initially, before I forget the thought, I would like a little bit of time spent explaining where we're at with athletics and activities. And then Director Stowers, I guess what I want to say is because of the volume of engagement, we really aren't going to be able to read into record the letters that we did receive that are part of the board packet. The board's had a chance to review those letters, but because we're unable to kind of foster that conversation, Director Stowers is willing to borrow Ms. Moffitt's question in the chat. I think I would be too, to get more explanation about that. But I want to just so that folks see how this public meeting works. Usually when public comment is submitted, we're not able to really exchange ideas and in that forum. We do try to come to some meaningful action as a board to foster that conversation. And so I want to sort of preempt that we're going to take that question up. I'd like to hear the staff address it, but also respectfully request attendees we're going to get through this agenda item in the best way we can, and that's going to be more of a direct district connection with your concerns than it is through the board meeting. This is not the best way for us to come to resolution or a common understanding of the challenge. So if I made any sense there, it's a good night. But with that said, so if we could deal with the athletics, but first there is a question related specifically to what you were talking about, Ms. Cook, about a statewide exception. Would you be able to talk to that?
I think what I would say is that when the guidance first came out in August, I know exactly what the guidance is about limited in-person instruction. We brought it and unpacked it as a DLT right away because it looked like an opportunity. It's like, wow, can we do this? Can we bring in? It wasn't just about special education students. It was about ensuring equity for all students. And then as we talked as a larger district, this is where I'll pass it over to Jordan because it gets into a bigger picture than just, one department can make alone. But I want you to know that it was definitely something we took seriously and unpacked and said, hey, is there any way we can do this? So I'll pass it over to Jordan from here.
Yeah, so this really is a liability question, and as a district, we discussed these ideas early on because of the lack of limitation of liability, like we talked about, or like I talked about earlier. We did make a team decision to not bring anybody back under that exception. I think another component of that, which Mr. Hugh would be more qualified to speak to, is we do have to have staff to bring students back. And so we have been working throughout the summer on memorandums of understanding with our associations. So there's a lot that goes into it. The opportunity, I guess, is there, but at the time we didn't feel like we could safely necessarily bring students back. With that said, and this would take a very long time to answer fully, and so I would invite the community to engage staff directly with questions on this. But just a high level, we've shared with the board about our rapid response teams, and those teams have been working throughout the summer to find ways to bring students back when we could do so, either through exception or through metrics. And our goal, or our guiding light, I guess you could say, with all of that, is bringing students back in a way that we're not necessarily worried about liability or limitations of liability, because we can safely bring the students back in and be reasonably assured that our activities would not contribute to a spreading event in our community.
Thank you for weighing in, both Ms. Cook and Mr. Ely. Dr. Pereira, I apologize because I jumped on your report to request that of them. So I'll do better next time.
No, you're fine. You're chair. This is your meeting, not mine.
Well, it was your agenda item. I would encourage, my inclination, though, I'll look to the board to help, particularly on the special education item, because I confess, I know that this, and I want to make clear to the community, the district leadership team has done an outstanding job, both of logistically planning this return to learn plan and communicating to the board. But as with community members, it's a dense plan that changes with some regularity. And so I have no doubt that this has been explained to me and to the board, particularly as it relates to special education. That said, I would encourage district leadership, if there's a good forum, perhaps through thought exchange or a different means of perhaps focusing on this, particularly with families who have a student who qualifies or is classified in the special education program. If there's some way to have a form of an explanatory statement.
There is, Chair Peterson.
Okay.
There is, and we can publish that information to families again as to when those sessions happen. They are obviously all virtual, so families, to make sure that they don't feel like they have to come to our building for those. And we, as the tool Lisa just highlighted, the thought exchange is what we will utilize to solicit feedback from families and parents. I'm having a series right now with key communicators, but definitely have some town hall options for families coming up. And I think we're communicating some information tomorrow. I'll see if we can't push some of that information in that letter itself. Just got to go back and read it because I wrote it earlier on. Just want to make sure that it syncs with the communication that's there.
Thank you, Dr. Pereira. Would you or your team be able to address the athletics and activities question that we've received from the community related to where we're at, where our neighbors are at? And I have a strong suspicion that Mr. Ely is going to be explaining something to us here shortly.
Yeah. You are correct. Mr. Elia and John Cook have been working very closely with our principals and our athletic directors regarding information. And I share information that I gather from OSIA board and make sure that we know what's happening and they're able to communicate that with our athletic directors and principals of our schools. Gentlemen.
You want me to kick it off, John?
Okay, I'm up.
Okay.
All right. Just in brief, the sports seasons were completely reworked by OSAA given the pandemic. We have 4 seasons now. Season 1 is a fall season where it's really conditioning, things like that districts could do if they so decide. And then you have season 2, which would be more the winter sports. Season 3 would be fall sports, and then season 4 would be spring sports. We authorized our head coaches to do virtual workouts starting October 1st this year, and many have. Haven't checked in on how that's going, but we authorized them to do so. About a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, we started engaging with the ADs at their behest of, is there a way to move forward with in-person conditioning and other workouts? We were just in the investigation stage of, is that possible? Do we want to take the risk when we also start to see this big escalation in cases in the pandemic, which is concerning. At the same time, the weather has turned also. Most of the cases we're finding of people doing in-person conditioning workouts are Clackamas County, other places. There's a few in Multnomah County, PPS being one of them that we've reached out to. We've also reached out to about 10 districts to see what plans did they have in place to do this. We've also reached out to find out, why did you do this? And some of the reasons really were about, public request, public pressure, not as much about getting students in. So we've done that background work, and here we are at this point. There is obviously a need. We know that having kids in person is better for all of us. None of us are enjoying the pandemic by any stretch of the imagination. But we were in the preliminary phases. And from my standpoint, looking at what the presentation I gave you guys tonight, the escalation in the pandemic is concerning for me when it comes to bringing back athletics in any form at this point.
I don't have a ton to add to that. I will say, and I want to own publicly with our community, that we do have finite time, we have finite resources, and I have prioritized other things over an athletics return. I recognize that we serve a community, and if the community would like us to focus there, we can absolutely do that. I do think that our neighboring districts, especially Portland Public, have offered a good model to us. And so we have been watching what's going on in the Portland Interscholastic League. I've also received documents from their administrative team that we can adapt and utilize in our district that have been vetted through their risk management department, which is obviously much bigger than our one-person risk management department. And through their legal department, which is also bigger than our one-person legal department. So, we are looking at what other school districts are doing and collaborating with those districts. Throughout the summer, though, we did focus on a lot of other issues, and I don't want to overstate our role in some of those things, but I would like our community to know that members of our district leadership team are directly responsible for exceptions to the transportation rules so that we could deliver meals with our buses. Our own superintendent is on the board of OSAA and has been working directly with the governor throughout the summer. And so, and I could go on with a lot of other things that are happening, that have happened and are continuing to happen. But really what it boils down to at the end of the day is we have to prioritize as a district. We do feel that we've developed very comprehensive plans that we know districts around us are utilizing as models, because we share with other districts just the way that they share with us, that are going to allow us to bring back our marginalized and disenfranchised populations of students, that when the metrics are there, we are ready to go with our elementary students. And so I am very proud of the work that we've done to prepare in that way. And we're not a long ways off from being able to have a plan for Superintendent Pereira to review for a return to athletics. It's just not something that we prioritized over some other things throughout the summer.
Chair Peterson,
yeah. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Pereira.
No, I was going to say, I hope that helps. And I think all of you know my background. Anybody that's looking, watching this right now can see behind me how much I value athletics and how important it is to my journey as a student athlete as well. I am acutely aware of the impact that it can have on students and their families. Again, nothing I want more as far as students to be back academically and through activities as well. But I want to make sure that it's safe and healthy for them as well.
Director Howitt, looked like you had a question.
I did. More of a comment as we, are talking about all of these things that are coming together. And in particular, I'm sure that it's being discussed, but just wanting to make sure that the equitable distribution of available sports activities between the boys and the girls. We hear a lot of talk, people want to get football back, and we don't hear from the community talk about the activities that girls traditionally participate in. So just, being aware, the community needs to know that if we bring back sports that typically have a high male percentage, that we're also bringing back sports that allow females to participate as well. So that's just something for the community to be aware of also, that we have to balance both sides of that.
And Dr. Pereira, I'm not seeing other questions from the board. I guess my last question is because go ahead.
I posted mine in the chat for Mr. Cook and Mr. Eli.
So if Chair Peterson, are you okay with me responding to the question?
Please, yeah, please state the question because I think it might have been privately distributed and then.
Yeah, so we were asked if we could share in the work session. I shared some considerations that our staff has thought about as we talk about an equitable return to athletics. And for what it's worth, I just want the community to know that this isn't something that we haven't thought about or that we take lightly. Dr. Pereira shared her experience with athletics. I think most on our leadership team can share other stories about athletics and activities and how instrumental those were in our own education experiences. Not to mention all of the stories we can tell about students that we know who have been impacted by those things. The equity question, though, with sports is a very challenging one. One perspective that we have heard is the idea that families with resources are taking their kids out of state for opportunities to participate, and so families who don't have those resources can't necessarily participate. And we've heard as well from those who are willing to sign liability releases and things like that, which Chair Peterson, you did ask me to speak to the liability waiver part, and so I'll come back to that. But when it comes to a liability waiver, something that weighs top of mind for me, heavy on my mind, is that the act of signing away a legal right or protection that would allow you to pursue remedy if something were to happen is something that affects different people in different ways and to different orders of magnitude. And so those same families who maybe have the resources to take their kids out of state to participate in sports may also be able to sign a waiver of liability because they have access to health care, they have access to paid time off from their jobs, or they know their jobs are at least protected if they have to take time off for an illness and things like that. And that's just not the case for all of the students that we serve in this community. So our focus as a district has been to be able to bring our students back. As I said earlier, talking about the instructional programs, it's the same for the athletic and activities programs, bring our students back in such a way that we don't need people to sign away their legal right to pursue relief. if something happens, because we can be reasonably confident that the activities that we are providing, the services that we're providing, are not going to lead to a spreading event in our community. And so the equity question when it comes to activities, when it comes to in-person learning, all of this stuff, we are deeply concerned about it. We have heard the community, and we don't take it lightly. We understand that people are have been negatively impacted by the things that are going on with this virus, and everybody's been impacted in different ways and to different degrees, and so we're sensitive to all of that. We are caught in a very challenging balancing act between you know, our legal liability, our moral obligation to a community as a public body, and just the myriad ways in which this virus has impacted our community. Oh, and then the liability waiver, because you did ask me to touch on the liability waiver. A liability waiver does not absolve the district of responsibility if something occurs that we could have reasonably expected to occur. So we could have everybody sign a liability waiver, and this goes back to just that strict liability of the district. We could have every participant sign a liability waiver, but if a court, for example, were to find that we could have reasonably anticipated the outcome experienced by people, we would still be legally responsible to provide remedy for the injury caused. I'm not an attorney, so we will get legal advice, but that is my understanding of it.
You just sounded like one.
Well, I've talked to a lot this summer.
Yeah.
And this, I promise, is my concluding question, except for, does the board have any other questions? So I heard, we're ready once the numbers go down, once we start to see that trend. And I'll just, if you could just lob a number of instructional days, particularly looking at K-5 and special education, how far from go are we from opening our buildings? How far from, like, I would expect reasonable anticipation. And then once we hit those numbers, how much of a delay should our community expect before we're able to reopen?
John, you want to talk about that too?
Yes, the way, Chair, your first phrase, that I had a bit of pit in my stomach. I wasn't sure where we were going, a little afraid, but we are, we're substantially along the way from a health and safety standpoint to say we could pull it off from that standpoint in about 2 weeks. From a scheduling standpoint and all the nuances in building a master schedule and a hybrid schedule, we're still a bit off on that one. We need another 4 or 5 weeks to really schedule that, but we have started that planning in earnest with the principals. So the health and safety, the logistics, all of that stuff, I'm very confident we could go pretty quickly. We need some more time on the classroom end, if that makes sense.
Most of that becomes part of personnel situations as well. I mean, we've surveyed our staff earlier on and just more recently as well. Of course, the dynamics sometimes change with their families. We want to make sure we're able to staff as well. I know that if we had at least about 90% of our staff come back, we'd be okay. Other than that, operationally becomes a challenge. I can't leave 15 kids. Actually, the metrics have increased the number from 10 to 20.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So we can't have 20 kids in a classroom, up to 20, I should say.
If we have the room.
If we have the square footage. Yes.
Yeah, well, if we have the square, yeah, but
Yes.
we're using some creative spaces, cafeterias, gyms, all those spaces, little codes in schools that maybe were a reading area will become smaller classrooms.
As we've reported to you, Chair, over the past few weeks, we have been behind the scenes. This has been a lot of our focus, keeping things going as we are and preparing for the eventual return, because that is not easy to pull off. I'm like Jordan before. I'm very confident that we're going to do it well. We've been working pretty well together as a team, but we still have some work to do.
Okay, thank you. Board, are there any other questions?
No, I just want to thank everybody for keeping that equity lens present when you're making these decisions. And to also, even when it comes to like those co-curricular activities, I know it's hard to share information, especially with our newcomers. Like we're used to going into classrooms and explaining things to them and guiding them through the process, and that's not easy to do now. So being creative and still, finding ways to invite them, to include them in those is great. Thank you.
Okay, and community, I just want to thank you for attending. Remote is really a tough way to engage in a process that's intended to serve you. So thank you for providing comments, and we invite them. Really do appreciate your perspectives, and they so much inform the business that we do. And so it's an encouragement to you to keep that up. And as you can plainly see, this is not the end of a conversation. The board has talked about this every 2 weeks since March. So with that, however, you're welcome to leave the meeting. Of course, welcome to stay, but we are going to move on from this agenda item, so we won't be talking about return to learn any further. And with that, we have on our schedule a board recess. I'm going to say let's take 10 minutes. I have 8:08 p.m. on my clock, so 8:18. I'd like to see everybody back, and we'll move through the agenda. So thanks, everybody. All right, everyone. I want to welcome us back and reconvene our meeting. Our first item as we join back together are committee meeting minutes or reports. These are provided to the board for review as an information item. So I just want to alert the board that there are policy review committee minutes from October 1st and October 8th. We won't have any further discussion on those items. Next is association reports. So we set aside time to hear from our respective associations. And first up is the Gresham-Barlow Education Association. And Rhett, are you with us, or do we have an alternative representative? I don't see anyone. Mr. Hugh, are you aware of?
I have not heard from him. I can text him right now, but I don't see him. So why don't we move on to OSCA?
We'll move on, and if he does end up joining us, we'll make time for an update then. So that means that we get to hear from the Oregon School Employees Association. Tia Ross.
Hi, thank you, Chair Peterson, but I'm actually going to pass tonight. I don't have anything to report. So,
all right.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us, Tia.
Okay, anytime.
Okay. So, all right, next up are citizens' requests to the board. In a typical meeting, we would take comments received in this remote environment. This is how we work in the remote environment. We'd take comments that we've received and we'd read them into record. That's the habit that we've taken up. We have over a dozen comments that we've received, and the board has had them over the last couple of days to review, and I hope the board has had that chance to. I reviewed them, read each one of them, and I just want to once again appreciate public engagement in this process that again is supposed to serve you and your families and this community. With there being so many comments, we're not going to read those into record. I would generally categorize comments on those three bases: an interest in returning our K-5 learners to school, an interest in returning our special education learners to school, in-person instruction, and opening up activities and athletics. And some of those comments overlapped a couple of those components. If I have misrepresented any public comment, I will invite the public that this chat window, which has been employed, is for your use. And so if I've misrepresented anybody's public comment or underrepresented a public comment, please provide it there. That said, I want to tell you how, because this is doing this transparently in a remote environment is unique. And so the way that this will work is our Secretary, Ms. Avery, will be moving those public attachments, which were the letters submitted to the board, into the, there will be a public attachments window under this agenda item. So if you are listening but don't have access to board docs, what you do is you go to the website under board information. If you click there, there's a banner to board docs. If you click on that banner, that will bring you into our November 5th window, and there's 2 meetings there. You want to look for the regular board business meeting. And by the way, you can find any of our agendas going back through board docs, at least over the last few years, since we've been using this program. From there, there is an attachment window under that agenda item that you'll just highlight by clicking on it. And then under that agenda item anyway, there will be public comment attachments. And you can read what, confirm that your communication with the board is there, but also be able to read what other community members are saying as well. that constitutes your public comment for the board, and I do just want to give you assurance that that the board has reviewed those and express, as far as it's in my power, our gratitude that you're engaged in the process and advocating for your student and for your community. And so anyway, thank you for that. Okay. So at this time, we move on to board reports and requests where the board can provide updates. I'm going to ask the board, in the interest of time, to try to keep your update to 3 minutes or so. And with that, I will start with Director Peluso. I think I always do this to Director Peluso. I always
Oh, there we go.
go first into the
Thanks everybody. Good to see everyone, even over this Zoom stuff. I just want to say that I was able to bring with James' help a group of seroptimists to come tour our brand new Gresham High School, and a variety of them all had graduated from there. And the best thing was when they opened the doors to the auditorium, they were all just about ready to, I don't know, start singing the songs. But it was absolutely amazing, and it was a great event. We now, now just a second. Now that the gyms are almost done and up and amazing, especially again for me, for my love of athletics. But again, those women were just in awe of what has happened for our community. And we will have some great new folks that will sing the praises of what's been happening at Gresham-Barlow School District. And I'll end with that.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Director Roscoe Beach.
Hi. I haven't done too much this past month. It's just been election season, so it's finally over. I've been sleeping in the past couple of days. That's been nice. Just overall, I have been seeing, folks with their emails and what they have to say. Overall, I am aware that, it's not easy, the decisions that we have to make as a district. And I'm really glad that overall we do put health and science first. And, I'm really glad that we do that because we're all in education. So of course we're going to do that. And with those frustrations, I just wish that, we lived in the richest country in the world where we could just afford to pay all of our citizens to stay home for a month and the virus can go away and everyone's lives can go back to normal, but that's not the case. So, I really wish that those funds were used more appropriately, but I do share those frustrations with the public. And overall, I do believe that everyone in our district is doing the right decision and they really do care about families and students. But just like I said, overall, it would just be nice if we had higher levels of government that wanted to provide citizens with the funds to stay home so the virus can go away in a month. But overall, that's pretty much all I have to say. And if you voted, thank you so much for being a voter. Thank you.
Director O'Connell.
How did I know I was going to be next? So yes, so election season's over. I'm glad to not be watching TV and seeing all the negative ads that have been going on for weeks on end. Now we have Christmas movies. So I would actually like to say right now, 4 years ago, we were getting ready for an election. And Carla alluded to the fact of the great work that has happened in that 4 years. So I would again like to thank the voters of the Gresham-Barlow School District from 4 years ago of passing the bond. I bike by the Gresham High School every single day. I have a very specific route so I can see the gym go up, and I've been seeing it go up all summer. It is absolutely phenomenal with all the frescoes that are up there now, and the courtyard. And every morning I'm waving to the guys that are working, give them a good peace sign. Thanks for their work. So again, thanks for Gresham-Barlow School District or the Gresham-Barlow community for passing that bond 4 years ago. Yes, I got my tax bill last week, and it was very tough to see, but I am very willing to pay it. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Director Howitt.
So a few things going on this month. I realized that I just was able to participate in my 10th presidential election. So woohoo, that was kind of exciting. And my girls were able to participate in that as well. So a couple of things, as we mentioned earlier in our minutes, had a couple of policy committee meetings. We've had a lot of good conversation about what our policies do and don't do, and just how to make them more equitable for all of our students. Reminder to everyone that we've had our Safe Schools training available. We were supposed to have completed it at the end of October. If you didn't, you still need to work on that. There were 4 modules that you needed to do. One in particular was mandatory. The others are highly recommended. And if you need the link for that, I'm sure Sarah can send it back out to you, but everyone should have that done. I understand there's chocolate on the line if you finish that. We also have as well an email that we received from the auditor. I think the subject line had a name Joseph on it, and it is a real email. It is not a scam email, so you need to respond to that. It responds to our Polly Rogers auditor, and it's part of the board engagement with that. So that's something that you do need to complete and get that returned. The Oregon School Boards Association Board of Directors was invited to a meeting with Governor Brown and Colt Gill and Lindsay Capps prior to her continuing conversation about the new metrics. And so she was able to hear from school boards from across the state as they were getting into the final wrap up of how they were going to announce what now is the new metrics. And then finally, so the Oregon School Board Association convention is virtual this year on November 14th. From 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And I believe that's a Saturday. And there are speakers, there are breakout sessions, there are opportunities to listen in and do some things. And I believe there's not a cutoff date yet to sign up for that because there was no room or food or anything else that they had to deal with. I think you can sign up pretty late into the procedure, but you do need to sign up before the 14th. And then finally, November is Native American Heritage Month. And they have on the Native American Heritage Month.gov webcast, film, literature, stuff that's sponsored by the Smithsonian, which has the Native American Museum, which I've been fortunate to attend a couple of times. So there are some very good things that students can do there to look at and review, and just look at another component of what our history is for this country. And with that, it's my board report.
By the way, it was Carter and Reagan 40 years ago.
Yes, it was. And actually it showed where there was a problem that I was riding the bus home because I worked at PGE back then, and it was 5 o'clock and they had already conceded the race because of the East Coast, and the West Coast, we still had our polls open. And there were a lot of people on the bus who said, why should I bother to vote? The polls are already closed and back east. So I do love vote by mail, where we make sure that we get our voices heard. But yeah, that was
I also like that they don't call it until after everybody's voted, at least the West Coast. So
exactly.
Mine was my first presidential election was 1988.
Right, Director Stowers.
I would like to read a comment in the chat from Wendy Nelson. She says, not being able to speak or have her comments read is very disappointing. My high schooler sat through this meeting for a chance to have his story heard. Although he learned a lot from listening to the process, he walked away feeling more frustrated than before. I would like to reiterate how important it is our public testimony is at these meetings. I appreciated the presentation. Health and safety of our community is our highest priority, and I really rely on the information provided by our administrative professionals. And I would also like to have more flexibility within our meetings to hear public comment and our ability to engage with the public at these meetings. I think that our current format is too restrictive, and that this is the only time that we can answer questions as a board. I really appreciate the level of community engagement and would like to encourage our community to do more. And that we have more forums for people to be heard. I heard Superintendent Pereira mention offering a town hall to speak on these topics for community members. I would like to take her up on that offer. I also want to reiterate the use of thought exchange. This is something that our district really uses and takes your input really seriously. And again, thank you for everyone that provide that input, and I would like to look into options of really engaging our community at future meetings.
Director Gomez.
I want to thank our nutrition services staff for all the work they're doing in preparing meals this year, this fall, and I know they did it during the summer and last spring. Yesterday was the first opportunity I had to go to Hollandale since the school year started. My niece asked me if I could take her, because she was seeking the opportunity to at least see classmates from afar. And it breaks my heart that she is seeking those opportunities because she misses being in the classroom. But I also had the opportunity to see how hard our nutrition services staff is working to provide for our students. And it was raining and they were out there. So thank you.
Peterson Home continues to engage in comprehensive distance learning. We have 6 learners in the home right now, including 2 kindergartners, 2 second graders, a 4th grader, and a 6th grader. 3 of our current 7 children we get to borrow. And because of incessant delays in our courts and in the human services arena, our additions lives are in perpetual temporary status. I just laud the professionalism of our educators and our support staff. I will beat that drum as long as we are in a remote environment, and then I'll get to do it in person. That you would take up the charge of seeing your profession so modified and morphed. It's just a testament to your profession that you, again, are teaching kindergartners how to mute their mics, and just saying that you'll take that on. That said, I will also beat this drum. Returning kids to school is of paramount importance. I will watch the metrics drive up. What we know, I believe with some certainty, is that kids are not super spreaders. That certain districts nationwide that have opened up have not had significant outbreak events that are inconsistent with their the general public. And I think every move that our state can make to reopen our schools is a critical step to make. Once again, we know that child abuse hotline calls are down 50 to 75% in our state, in spite of our adults living in a more stressful situation than ever. We know that our kids who are already experiencing the negative side of an achievement gap, that achievement gap is widening significantly with every 2 months that we are in this environment of learning. And those families like mine that are seeing this play out every day see exactly why that achievement gap is widening. That is not an indictment on any person in this room and the incredible professional administrators that have jumped through logistical hoops to make this happen. That said, we have to take risk at some point as a society and prioritize our kids higher than the adults in the room. So that's my presentation. That said, I also understand that the chat was disabled, and at least I understand it is. And what I would like to reopen public comment, allow us, again, so the invitation here, I recognize that it can't be a popular move. With I believe we had 18 public comments. Were we to allow the 3 to probably 5 minutes to read into record each of those, it's just not, it's not practical, and that's not fair to public engagement. So again, I received those comments, and like any human being, generally bucketized them, not to reduce your individual frustrations or challenges, but simply to try to broadly categorize as best as I could. So I recognize the urgency for K through 5 learners, again, special education learners back in our schools, and activities and athletics at the high school level. If I misrepresented any of those comments, the chat is open to you, and we will readdress this. Right now we're doing board reports. We're going to go through 2 information items, and that chat I would like to stay open until then. And if there's something misrepresented, then we can draw that individual letter, or I'll adapt and we'll figure out how to represent the public interest.
I have a request. We do have a high schooler in our district on the line, and as we are an education institution, I do think that it would be a great learning experience that if he is still there and has the opportunity to speak about his experience, I would like to hear.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to go through our information items, and again, Ms. Nelson, I believe that's your son that we're referencing. If you're still here, welcome that. And I also submitted, but you should know that all of your board members' personal cell phone numbers are available on the district website, and I know that all of us are available as well. So whatever way your son or any public member who's listening will not only feel that your voice is heard, but respected. Welcome a phone call, and Ms. Nelson, if your son would like to speak, we can open up the floor to him. But anyway, that's my very long explanation. Okay, so board, I did not miss anybody on the board. Is that's accurate, right? Okay. We have information items. Measure 98 project at Gresham High School. Mr. Ely.
Thank you. I'm glad that so much of our community has muscled through this meeting and is still with us. This is just an information item for the board. I think it's a fun celebration. Could have just as easily been Carla Gay giving this update, but wanted to share with the board that Carla's team actually brought through a project, construction project using Measure 98 funds, and I'll just read the explanation in the board packet now. The gopher hole at Gresham High School has undergone a transformation, which was not in the scope of work for bond-funded projects. Upgrades include an improved inclusive layout, new cabinetry and electrical treatments, along with an aesthetic treatment in line with other GHS renovations. Our district's career and technical education coordinator, Liz Mackey, summed up the student impact quite well. The new gopher hole space has been upgraded not only in looks, but also in functionality. These upgrades were done with keeping in mind the entire design of the bond work. The gopher hole now matches the renovations in the rest of the building. Also, one of the best functionality upgrades was creating a space that would be accessible for students of other abilities. Students in wheelchairs will now be able to not only shop in the store more effectively, but they can also participate in the marketing program and fit behind the counter and reach everything they will need to. The space is a better match for what students will experience in the retail industry, which better prepares them for their future. The space creates more opportunities for students to expand their marketing skills and innovate in those marketing strategies. Additionally, the upgrades bring value to the students' work along with excitement. These renovations show the students that the work they are doing matters and that the school supports them. That's the end of her comment. Upon completion, this work will be funded by grant funding from the High School Success Act, which is commonly known as Measure 98. For consistency of design and quality, the district has used the same designers and contractors utilized throughout the rest of the facility. That's the end of that item. Do you want me to just go right in the next one?
Just pausing if board has any questions. Okay, yes, please continue.
All right. As of September 30th, both revenues and expenditures continue to trend unfavorably, but the overall outlook is improving. These are still very early projections and are not immediately cause for concern nor optimism. Regarding revenue, the significant factors creating an unfavorable condition in the last report remain the same, namely the lack of fees, gate admissions, and facilities rentals, along with meager investment returns. In all, revenue projections continue trending under budget by just over $900,000. Regarding expenditures, the charter school payments line item is now on trend to exceed budget by nearly 1.6 million, a projected deficit increase of 76,000 over the last report. These payments are based on the number of students served by our charter schools, which has increased this year based on initial enrollment figures. Overall, despite enrollment figures being down more than 5%, our revenue outlook remains in decent shape due to strong local tax collections and extended average daily membership weighted in the state school fund, meaning that we are being funded at our 2019-20 enrollment levels rather than the lower current year number. And then the report is attached.
Hey Jordan, this is Matt. Question on the charter school line item over budget by $1.6 million. Specifically, is there one particular school that is covered, or is that all? And then one thing I haven't heard, and this more DLT question, would be how are those schools serving the children as well, or differently than Gresham-Barlow School District?
Those are great questions. I probably won't speak to the second one as much. Your first question, this is for all of our charter schools. Metro East Web Academy has seen the largest uptick in enrollment of our charters. And those students, some of those are Gresham-Barlow students that just transferred into that academy. Some of those students are coming from other districts around us. And the reason that matters is because when a student moves into one of our charters, they become a student of our district. And so we've seen our quote unquote brick and mortar enrollment drop by over 500 students this year. We've seen some of that offset by increases to the charters. I think about 300 students to our charters. But because we're being funded at last year's revenue or last year's enrollment, we're not going to see a revenue increase because of those students that have come from outside the district into the district, which is a very unique position. I think there's 5 districts across the state who have that set of circumstances. If those students had gone to another web academy that is sponsored by the state, that web academy's district, being the state, would have received the revenue for that student, and the district that they came from would keep receiving revenue for that student because of that extended ADM component of the state school fund. And in this situation, that's not happening. So across the state, like I said, I think there's 5 of us where we're not seeing an uptick in revenue because of new students brought into the district into our charters, but we are seeing that increased flow through because, of course, the charters actually are serving those students, and so we need to flow the funds through to them to provide those services. And I don't know if there's somebody else on the call that can speak to how the charters are serving.
I just need a general, I don't need a detail, just kind of a general.
I'm happy to address some of the things because we do oversee at least our local charters. And we have heard from parents that have made the decision. So what I would say is some felt as though we were new at the approach of comprehensive distance learning, and that some schools, especially those that had been online, had that practice. What I will say is I can speak to what we do, and what we've been doing well is because we knew that we had to make adjustments from last spring. And because of the because of the distance learning from last spring, we knew that there were some deficits. We knew that all across the nation, our students would have needed a different approach to standards. And so our standards alignment and all of that was looked at carefully versus just a scripted program or scripted courses, because we really have a different amount of time that we are actually interacting in a synchronous way with our students. We also have the approach with a strong social emotional, strong supports in the collaboration and a relationship piece, which we know that our students and our families and many of us are facing in this COVID situation. And so again, really interweaving that with everything else, I think is very important, and building that relationship and having the support for technology, the support for SEL, the outreach for our families. Yes, it's a new approach to us, but we really did have the practice running in spring and really took off this year with it, and an adjustment of our standards. So I know you asked, what are they doing? But what I'd say is, yes, they have a program that had been rehearsed more than we have, but we looked at what our students and the unique differences of this past year and made those adjustments.
Well, I think it would be good down the road, and again, not anytime soon, but to get an understanding of our other charters other than the Web Academy are doing. That would be interesting because they don't really have the same resources that Gresham-Barlow School District has in terms of one-on-one for laptops or the digital devices and whatnot. But again, that's another comment. So Jordan, going back to your question or your answer then, is this, so we're not recovering revenue for these folks that are coming into the district? Is that just something for this year, or is this a true up down the road? Or I'm not sure I'm understanding that part of it.
Yeah, so there will not be a true up down the road. I mean, there is a true up every year, but basically when we report our ADM to the state, it includes our charters and our charter enrollment. And when a student comes from out of the district to one of our charters, they become our student. And so we've lost 500 students to our brick and mortar schools. We've gained, I think, 300 to our charters. That still leaves us 200 below our last year numbers. And we're being funded at our last year numbers. Right. So, okay. You know, that being said, we are being funded at a higher rate than the number of students we're currently serving by the state school fund.
So we're actually technically a little bit budget positive, although we didn't anticipate the $1.6 million additional expenses. So, well,
in our budget, we didn't anticipate losing the 500 kids. So
right.
the revenue side of our budget is down about $900,000. Expenditure side of our budget is about 1.6 million. So we're not budget ahead. Nope, but our revenue, other than some of those smaller local revenue sources, our major revenue sources, the state school fund and our local property taxes, are both, I guess you could say, trending on whole, and so to our budget. And so so in a way, I guess you could say we are on track with our budget. It's just those local revenue sources, which for the most part should be offset by not providing the services that normally come with those things, you know, so not charging gate admissions and fees for activities and things like that, because we're not providing those services. We also don't have the expenditure going out. So that 900,000 that we're low on revenue should be mostly offset on the expenditure side. And then the uptick of the 1.6 million to charters is not going to be offset. We are going to have to absorb that in our anticipated revenue.
And we're still quite a bit of a year to go yet, so it'll be interesting to see what that number looks like.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Jordan, my question is, so Measure 110 looks to have passed. Well, it did pass. And so the state school fund will be forfeiting $73 million to fund addiction recovery centers. When would we see that effect, and what would that effect be in our district?
So the 73 million is an estimate. The way that measure was written is that quarterly, all amounts exceeding, I think 11.25 million, 11.65, something like that, now goes into these drug rehabilitation programs and into tobacco cessation programs and things like that. So the estimated amount or the estimated impact to the state school fund, if the legislature does not take any mitigating action, is about $73 million. Or $73 million that they had previously counted on when talking about our next biennium's budget. That's $73 million per year, not per biennium. And so the impact to our district, we serve about 1.6% of the students in Oregon. The weighted students, I guess you could say, in Oregon, we account for 1.6% of the statewide ADMW. And so you can take that $73 million, multiply it by 1.6%. I believe it comes out to 1.168 million. So that would be what we would expect to lose as a district through the state school fund if the legislature does not take a mitigating action to fund the state school fund from somewhere else. I don't think that that's a big concern right now. We haven't heard the legislature talk about not providing for what we call the current service level. The major impact to our district is that there's disagreement between school business officials and the legislative fiscal office as to how much state support we need to maintain the current service level. But once we sort that out, and I am working with the state on that, once we sort out and can all agree on what current service level looks like, what we understand is that the legislature does have at least some appetite to fully fund that current service level for education. So it may come from another source rather than, from the marijuana tax, but I do expect the state to make us whole.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions, Mr. Ely? All right, my first announcement is an appreciation for Ms. Avery, who not only manages document migrations, actively recording minutes, observing chat that I did not preemptively tell her how I anticipated handling that. So first, a ton of gratitude to you, Sarah, for all the work you do for the board and for the community. That's my first announcement. Now, coming up, we have our next board work session, which we're going to have in-person board at Kelly Creek Elementary School. December 3rd, we'll have a board work session virtually, followed by a regular board business meeting. December 3rd, it'll be back with a Zoom visit. I'm sure there's community events coming up. I am aware that Clear Creek has a community effort to clear some brush to potentially open up some outside learning space. That's coming up this Saturday. I don't totally recall the time. I think it's 10 to 4 or somewhere in that range. Nope, I just got Nate. Carla, you seem to have the answer.
Yeah, come on out and get grubby. This is a great way to get your get some good mental health SEL stuff going on there outside, away from screens. The first session is from 8 to noon. You can come anytime. We built a 4-hour session. It's Solve is handling all of the details. The city of Gresham is donating the tools, the gloves. Dr. Catrice Pereira, although she doesn't know this, is buying all of the granola bars for everyone. She volunteered water, but they got water, so she's going to buy granola bars instead. Going to pick those up tomorrow, Catrice.
I'm going to make those tonight, Carla.
Oh, okay, thank you. She's making them. I don't think those are COVID safe. And yeah, and then there'll be another session at 12:30. They Solve PGE, the city of Gresham, outdoor school, and Clear Creek and Gresham-Barlow School District have all partnered on this. So it's very exciting. It's all going to be COVID safe, and Solve is managing all the liability for those of you who are concerned about that. So we're in the clear. Thank you, Jordan, for giving us the clear, and I'm very excited to go clear some blackberry and make an eco field study site for our students at Clear Creek Middle School.
Right. Again, November 7th. And if you need those details, contact the district, because I definitely don't know. Clearly don't know exactly what's happening, but super appreciative to Carla to weigh in and bail me out. She also looks like she's right now on my screen recording a Queen music video, because it's like all black with just great lighting. Well done. I could learn something from you. Okay, so those are our announcements. Again, in the chat, you could find, anyway, community, continue to engage. We appreciate you. And district leadership team, well done.
Take a moment just to, because I'm going to mention that I didn't see all the comments or all of the public testimony. And I would just like to take a moment to read the names and the titles and recognize what it is, and then make a commitment to our participants that I will read it. And I had not received all of them until now. And so we have Jenny Glover in person for special ed and younger students, Paul Frederick, COVID and schools, Heidi McLaughlin, return to learn, Kelly Rasmussen, and I apologize if I butcher any of your names, CDL concerns and start of in-person sports conditioning, Heidi Schmidt, return to learn and return to sports, Leah Moffett, immediate in-person instruction for special population, special ed, ELL, etc. Lisa Perez, request that training for high school sports be allowed to begin. Andrea Moat, allowing students to read. Christy Medio, Wendy Nelson and Andy Nelson, open sports facilities for athletics to condition and train. Cindy Paskett, open pools. Holly Riegelman, allow students to resume sports and activities. Joel Woodard, concern around distance learning. Woodard, back to school and life. Louise Benjamin, allow students to play sports and participate in activities. Dan Stump, let them play. Jessica and Jose Estrada, athletics. Lindsay Arnold, allow students to resume sports and activities. So I will commit personally to read all of them.
Yeah, as a reminder to the board, those comments were provided in the agenda item under administrative content. Okay.
We just got those like just now. Even before the meeting, they weren't there.
If you log in under your personal account.
I know, but I'm just saying before the meeting, they weren't there. So I was actually just surprised.
Like, I got a point of order. This is not the agenda item right now. I think we're in an adjournment.
Okay, I just think that public comment is important and government accountability is also important. Just putting that out
I think it is too, but also there's a process to follow and we're not following it.
Okay, listen, bad luck, right? To clarify, because I encountered this a year and a half ago, and this is just simply a logistical issue. If I only use the district website to open up a board agenda item, then I will not see those when they are administrative content, which is what they were until we submitted as a record. So you have to log in from board docs as a board member in order to see administrative content. It's a protection of sensitive information, could be. In this case, we make it public. We've just had a process where those become public after our meeting. So that's the full explanation. Sorry that I didn't make that clear to folks in advance that it would be posted in the administrative content. I made a bad assumption. So points well taken, Director Stowers. I encourage the whole board to review every email if you haven't seen it already. With that, my appreciation to everybody for helping facilitate this, and there being no other business before the board, we're adjourned.